The security camera had been Elijah Morgan's idea, and he'd admit it to his wife now. 48 hours ago, it had seemed like a perfectly reasonable solution to the mysterious footprints they kept finding around their backyard pool each morning. Now, as he watched the view counter-tick past 3 million on the viral video that had turned his quiet suburban life upside down, he wondered if there was any way to put this particular Ginny back in its digital bottle. Another 100,000 views in the last hour, Dana said, peering over his shoulder at the laptop screen. Her tone was equal parts amazement and horror. I told you we should have talked to her directly instead of posting it. Elijah ran a hand through his thinning hair. How was I supposed to know it would blow up like this? I just wanted to show a few neighbors so someone could identify her. The her in question was now known across 3 continents simply as Pool Karen, a 40-something woman with a helmet of highlighted blonde hair and the entitled confidence of someone who had never been told no in her adult life. The security footage that had captured her 6:30 a.m. intrusion into the Morgans' backyard had been crystal clear, almost cinematically so, thanks to Elijah splurging on the premium model with night vision and 4K resolution. The video began innocuously enough. A figure in an expensive-looking tracksuit approaching the 8-foot privacy fence that surrounded the Morgans' property. Then, with surprising agility for someone in designer athleisure wear, she hoisted herself up and over, landing with a surprisingly graceful hop on their side. The timestamp showed 6:32 a.m., the Morgans still asleep inside. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the woman proceeded to make herself completely at home. She set down her water bottle and phone on the Morgans' patio table. She adjusted the lounge chairs to catch the early morning sun. Then, with a quick glance toward the house, she stripped down to a swimsuit that had apparently been worn under the tracksuit and dove into the Morgans' pool. The internet had been particularly fascinated by the next part, 22 minutes of the woman doing practice laps while occasionally checking what appeared to be a waterproof fitness watch. When she finally emerged, she toweled off with the Morgans' poolside towel, redressed, and climbed back over the fence as if this were the most normal morning routine in the world. I still can't believe she brought her own towel, but used ours to dry off, Dana murmured, the particular indignity of this detail still fresh. The footage might have remained a bizarre private mystery if not for what happened next. As Elijah had later explained in his viral post, they had checked the camera expecting to catch neighborhood teens or perhaps figure out which neighbor's dog had been leaving wet paw prints. Instead, they discovered an adult woman had been treating their pool like her personal fitness center. Elijah's decision to post a short clip to the neighborhood watch group had seemed logical at the time. Unknown woman repeatedly trespassing in our backyard. Anyone recognize her? He'd written. He hadn't expected Jen Wilson from 3 streets over to immediately identify the swimmer as Diane Holloway, PTA president and wife of a local real estate developer. He certainly hadn't expected Jen to tag Diane in the comments, or for Diane to respond with an incandescent paragraph about how some people shouldn't install pools if they're not going to use them regularly, and how she was merely ensuring the Morgans' investment was being properly maintained with adequate circulation. By that evening, screenshots of the exchange had escaped the neighborhood group and made their way to Twitter. By the following morning, the full video had been uploaded to Reddit and hit the front page. By noon, it had been picked up by news sites hungry for the next viral outrage. She's hired a PR firm, Dana said, looking at her phone. Just posted a statement about regrettable misunderstandings between neighbors and learning opportunities for community boundaries. Elijah stared at the screen where strangers from around the globe were now dissecting every frame of their backyard, every word of Diane's comments, and speculating wildly about the dynamics of their previously anonymous suburban community. Well, he said finally, closing the laptop with a decisive click, I guess we should figure out what we're going to say when the local news van that's been circling the block finally gets up the courage to knock on our door. Dana nodded, her expression grim. And maybe we should change the pool code. Something tells me we haven't seen the last of Diane Holloway. As if on cue, Elijah's phone buzzed with a notification. Another 100,000 views. The pool Karen saga was just getting started. Diane Holloway had never experienced a proper crisis of reputation before. As she sat in the leather chair across from Meredith Sawyer, crisis management specialist at Pinnacle Public Relations, she still couldn't quite believe how quickly her life had unraveled over something so trivial. Let me be frank, Mrs. Holloway, Meredith said, sliding her iPad across the polished conference table. The initial statement we put out has only made things worse. The comments are not favorable. Diane glanced down at the screen where beneath her carefully crafted apology, thousands of people she'd never met were dissecting her character with the precision of surgeons wielding particularly dull scalpels. I don't understand why everyone is so obsessed with this, Diane said, pushing the iPad away. It's just a pool. The Morgans are barely home during the week. They used it maybe 3 times all last summer. I was just being efficient. Meredith's face remained professionally neutral, and her silence spoke volumes. You don't understand, Diane continued, desperation edging into her voice. I've lived in Oakwood Estates for 11 years. I've been PTA president for 4 terms. I raised $80,000 for the new playground equipment. My husband develops half the properties in this county. We're respected. We're respected, Meredith corrected gently. The internet has dubbed you Pool Karen. And unfortunately, that's sticking. The memes alone have reached over 15 million impressions. Someone has already made a dance remix of your neighborhood group comments. Diane's phone buzzed with an incoming call, her husband again. She silenced it without looking. Richard had barely spoken to her since the video went viral, claiming he needed to limit the collateral damage to the business. His carefully worded statement about his wife's independent actions had been particularly humiliating. What about legal action? Diane asked. The Morgans filmed me without consent. They invaded my privacy by posting it. Meredith's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Mrs. Holloway, you were trespassing on their property. You invaded their privacy. Any judge would throw out such a claim immediately, and pursuing it would only generate more negative attention. Outside the conference room windows, Diane could see downtown where she'd once been greeted warmly at charity galas and community events. Now she couldn't even go to the grocery store without feeling eyes on her, hearing whispers, seeing phones discreetly raised to capture the wild Pool Karen in her natural habitat. Her son had stopped answering her texts after his college roommates recognized her in the video. Her daughter's friends had created a TikTok challenge inspired by her pool routine. Even her mother had called from Florida to ask what on earth she'd been thinking. There must be something we can do, Diane said, her voice smaller now. Actually, there is, Meredith replied, straightening up. A complete change of strategy, total transparency and genuine contrition. What does that mean exactly? It means, Meredith said, that we stop pretending this was a misunderstanding. You admit you were wrong, that you violated their property, their privacy, and basic social norms. You apologize without qualification, and you make meaningful amends. Amends? Diane repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. The damage to the Morgans goes beyond trespassing. They're dealing with privacy issues themselves now. Their house is all over the internet. They have reporters trespassing, ironically enough, to get photos. Their address has been compromised. That's hardly my fault, Diane protested. It is entirely the consequence of your actions, Meredith countered, and acknowledging that is the first step toward resolution. Diane stared out the window again. She thought of the Morgans' pool with its perfect southern exposure that caught the morning sun just right. She thought of how for months she'd slipped in and out, never once considering she might be caught, let alone that millions would witness her entitlement. She thought of how she convinced herself she deserved access to something simply because she wanted it. What kind of amends? She asked finally. Meredith smiled for the first time. I've drawn up a proposal. It's bold, but if you're serious about rebuilding your reputation, it might just work. As Meredith outlined the plan, Diane felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. It was humiliating. It was public. It was, she had to admit, exactly what she deserved. When Meredith finished speaking, Diane took a deep breath. Set it up, she said, and call the Morgans. I think it's time I apologize to them properly, without an audience. As she gathered her things to leave, her phone buzzed with another notification. Someone had tracked down her high school yearbook photo, where she'd been voted most likely to. They want us to do asterisk what asterisk. Dana Morgan stared at her husband across their kitchen island, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Elijah checked his phone again, rereading the email from Meredith Sawyer at Pinnacle Public Relations. They want us to meet with Diane on camera for what they're calling a community reconciliation session. Professionally moderated, of course. Of course, Donna echoed sarcastically, because nothing says sincere apology like a camera crew. The Morgans' life had become unrecognizable in the weeks since the pool video went viral. They'd have to disconnect their doorbell after it chimed nonstop for 2 days. Their phones rang with calls from morning shows, podcasters, and journalists hoping to secure an exclusive with the victims of Pool Karen's aquatic trespass, as one particularly creative headline had put it. Their 15 minutes of fame had quickly transformed from novel to nightmarish. Donna, a 4th-grade teacher, had been asked by her principal to take personal days until the attention died down. Elijah, who worked remotely as a software developer, couldn't focus with the constant interruptions. They'd even sent their 10-year-old son to stay with his grandparents after a classmate brought printed screenshots of the viral video to school. It says here that Diane will make a formal apology and they'll announce a substantial donation to the community center's pool renovation project in our name, Elijah continued reading. And they'll cover professional pool cleaning and maintenance for us for a year. Dana snorted, generous. Though I'm not sure I want to swim in that pool ever again knowing she's been sneaking in there for. How long do you think it's been going on? Elijah shrugged. The camera only goes back 3 weeks, but based on her comfort level hopping that fence, months at least. They sat in silence for a moment, the absurdity of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Their backyard, once their private sanctuary, now felt tainted. The internet had dissected every detail, from the pattern of their patio tiles to the brand of their pool furniture. Someone had even started a GoFundMe for them that had inexplicably raised over $12,000 before they requested it be shut down and the money donated to a local shelter. "You know what's weird?" Dana said finally. "Part of me feels sorry for her." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "For Diane? The one who violated our property for months and then tried to justify it?" I know, Dana said, waving a hand. "But did you see that interview her son gave? The kid looked mortified. And apparently, her husband's business is taking a hit. The whole thing just spiraled so far beyond what we ever intended." The doorbell rang, causing them both to jump. Through the kitchen window, they could see a delivery van retreating down their driveway. "I'll get it," Elijah sighed, walking to the front door. He returned moments later with a large wicker basket wrapped in cellophane. "It's from the neighborhood association. With deepest apologies for the disruption to your peace and privacy," he read from the attached card. Dana peeled back the cellophane to reveal an assortment of expensive bath products, 2 bottles of wine, and a gift card to a local restaurant. "Well, if nothing else, this whole debacle has finally gotten the neighborhood association to acknowledge our existence. They've ignored our requests to trim those overhanging branches from the common area for 3 years." Elijah laughed despite himself. He set the basket on the counter and returned to the email on his phone. "So what do we tell them about this reconciliation thing?" Dana thoughtfully traced the rim of her coffee mug. "Let's be honest. This isn't going away. The internet has a longer memory than we like to think. Maybe the best path forward is through the circus. Meet with her. Accept the apology if it seems genuine. Let them donate to the community pool, and then hopefully everyone moves on to the next viral outrage." Elijah considered this, and if her apology isn't genuine? Dana's expression hardened slightly. Then at least everyone will see that too. No one noticed Marcus Chen at first. The 23-year-old stood at the back of the crowd gathered outside the community center, baseball cap pulled low, just another spectator waiting for a glimpse of the internet's latest viral sensation and her victims. Unlike the others, however, Marcus wasn't broadcasting his location on social media or speculating about what was happening inside. He was sweating, fidgeting with his phone, and working up the courage to step forward. Inside, the carefully orchestrated reconciliation was proceeding according to Meredith Sawyer's meticulous plan. Diane had delivered her prepared apology with apparent sincerity. The Morgans had graciously accepted it. The mediator had guided them through a discussion about privacy, boundaries, and community standards. The cameras had captured it all, framing the scene like a reality show season finale. And now Meredith announced right on cue, to demonstrate Mrs. Holloway's commitment to making amends, she would like to present the Morgans with a token of her sincere regret. On the table, a Pinnacle PR assistant placed an oversized check made out to the Oakwood Estates Community Pool Renovation Fund in honor of the Morgan family. The amount, $50,000, elicited a small gasp from Dana. Additionally, Diane added, her voice steadier now, "I've arranged for professional pool maintenance for the Morgans for the next year, and I've volunteered to lead the Community Safety Committee, where we'll be developing guidelines for privacy and property respect in our digital age." The camera zoomed in on the handshake between Elijah and Diane, the carefully choreographed visual conclusion to what the internet had dubbed #Poolgate. Someone would later isolate this moment as a GIF, captioning it "Crisis Management, $15,000. Pool Maintenance, $5,000. Buying your way out of internet infamy, priceless." "And cut," called the director. "That was perfect, everyone. We'll get some additional B-roll and reaction shots, and then..." The community center doors burst open. A young man in a baseball cap stood in the doorway, phone in hand, eyes scanning the room until they locked on Diane Holloway. "You're a hypocrite," he called out, his voice cracking slightly with nerves or emotion. "All of this whole production, it's just more lies." Security moved toward him immediately, but he raised his phone. "I have proof. She's still doing it. Different pool, St. Karen." The room froze. Meredith Sawyer recovered first, stepping smoothly between the cameras and the intruder. "Young man, this is a private event. If you got concerns, we'd be happy to address them through the proper channels." "Proper channels?" He laughed bitterly. "Like when I emailed your firm 3 times about this and got ignored?" "No thanks." Diane had gone completely still, her face draining of color. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what are you doing here?" The young man, Marcus, looked directly at the Morgans now. "My name is Marcus Chen. I live in Lakeside Gardens, the development on the other side of the park. I've been working nights while finishing my degree, so I'm home during the day. 2 days ago, I spotted Mrs. Holloway using our community pool. the one that requires a key fob that she definitely doesn't have. I recognized her from the viral video and started recording. He held up his phone, where freeze frames of a familiar blonde figure could be seen slipping through a gate. The timestamp showed 2:13 p.m., 2 days earlier, the same day Diane had met with Meredith to plan this very reconciliation event. I thought everyone should know, Marcus continued, his initial nervousness giving way to righteous indignation, that while she's been crafting this whole redemption narrative, she just found a different pool to trespass in. One where she thought no one would recognize her. The cameras, which had never stopped rolling, captured every second of Diane's face as it cycled through shock, embarrassment, and then a flicker of something else. Resignation, perhaps, or the dawning realization that some patterns run deeper than even public humiliation can erase. Is this true? Dana Morgan asked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Diane opened her mouth, closed it, and simply nodded. I didn't. I wasn't thinking. It was hot, and I was stressed, and the community pool was right there, and I don't know why I did it. Again. Meredith Sawyer looked like she might faint. The mediator was already gathering his belongings, clearly recognizing a lost cause when he saw one. The camera crew, on the other hand, had never been more engaged, repositioning to capture every angle of this unexpected plot twist. What Elijah Morgan said after a long moment, I guess some people really don't learn. 6 months had passed since the day that became known in local lore as the Double Karen exposé. Summer had given way to fall and fall to winter, and now spring was cautiously returning to Oakwood Estates. With it came a sense of renewal that seemed particularly fitting to Dana Morgan as she stood at the edge of the community center pool, clipboard in hand. That's the last item on the inspection checklist, she said, making a final mark on the form. Everything looks ready for the grand reopening tomorrow. Beside her, Marcus Chen nodded, his gaze sweeping over the completely renovated facility. The old, cracked concrete deck had been replaced with elegant pavers. New lounge chairs lined the perimeter. The outdated filtration system had been upgraded to state-of-the-art equipment. Most striking was the beautiful mosaic tile work around the pool's edge, featuring an abstract pattern of blues and greens that seemed to ripple with the water's movement. Hard to believe it all came together so quickly, he said, adjusting the name badge on his shirt that identified him as Aquatics Director. Dana smiled. Amazing what can happen when the community actually works together instead of just talking about it. The renovation of the Oakwood Estates community pool had indeed been remarkable, not just for its speed, but for how it had transformed the neighborhood in unexpected ways. What had begun as a scandalous viral moment had evolved into something no one could have predicted. After the disastrous reconciliation attempt and Marcus's dramatic revelation, Diane Holloway had disappeared from public view. Rumors circulated about rehab, about divorce, about her fleeing to a sister's house in another state. The truth, when it eventually emerged, was both simpler and more complex. Diane had checked herself into a 30-day program for what her carefully worded statement called behavioral health issues related to entitlement and boundary recognition. Richard had, in fact, filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and moving quickly to distance his real estate business from his soon-to-be ex-wife's notoriety. The $50,000 donation to the pool renovation, however, had already been processed, and somewhat surprisingly, Diane had insisted it remain in place despite her public humiliation. It's the least I can do, she had written in a brief but sincere email to the Neighborhood Association Board. The community deserves a pool everyone can use properly. What no one expected was for Marcus Chen's video to inspire a flood of similar donations. A GoFundMe for the pool renovation had gone viral in its own right, with people from across the country contributing small amounts in solidarity against pool entitlement and to support proper pool access for all. The campaign had raised over $200,000, enough to completely transform the aging facility. Have you heard from her? Marcus asked hesitantly, his voice drawing Dana back from her thoughts. Dana nodded. She sent us a letter last month. Handwritten. Said she's been doing a lot of work on herself. Asked if we might be open to talking someday when we're ready. No cameras this time. And Elijah thinks we should. He says if she's genuinely trying to change, the least we can do is hear her out. Dana paused, watching the late afternoon sun create dancing patterns on the pool's surface. I'm not quite there yet, but maybe soon. The sound of footsteps made them both turn. Elijah approached, carrying a stack of pamphlets for the next day's grand reopening ceremony. Security system is all set up, he announced. Motion-activated lights, cameras covering all access points, and the new key fob system has been tested. Nobody's getting in here without proper authorization. Dana raised an eyebrow. You know, for someone who accidentally started this whole thing with one security camera, you become quite the surveillance enthusiast. Elijah laughed. Let's just say I've developed a healthy appreciation for boundaries. Speaking of which, he handed a pamphlet to Marcus. We finalized the new community guidelines. Every section about pool usage now explicitly states that members must use their own access fobs and cannot share them or climb fences under any circumstances. "We're calling it the Holloway Rule," Marcus said with a small smile. "Not officially, of course, but everyone knows." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it and stopped abruptly. "It's trending again," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. Donna and Elijah peered over his shoulder at the screen. Someone had created a side-by-side comparison of the original Pool Karen video and the community center pool today with the caption, "How it started versus how it's going." The post had already accumulated thousands of likes and shares. Will it ever really be over? Dana wondered aloud.